first meeting,
Hi.
first online meeting of the Node Inclusivity Working Group. We have a variety of things that we're going to try and get through today. So, but first, let's go around and introduce ourselves so that everyone else watching knows who we are. My name is Brian Hughes. I go by Nebrius on GitHub, and I guess we just kind of go along the line. Ashley.
Cool. Ashley Williams, AG Dubs or Ashley G. Williams on GitHub.
Next up, we have Jonah, who's not able to talk. He's in and has some other things he has to be in, but he's also going to be helping us out.
He says he is Jonah Sup and can't talk right now.
Julie, you're next.
Oh. Hi, I'm Julie Pagano. I'm also Julie Pagano on GitHub.
Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat. I am at Maybe Cats on Twitter and zcat on GitHub.
Trot. I think that's Trot.
I'm Rich. I'm Trot on GitHub and Twitter.
And we have the fourth eye.
Oh, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Oh, no. Nope. No, we can't hear you, fourth eye.
Yeah, sorry, no sound. You can type in the chat window as well, kind of while this is getting sorted. All right, so let's go ahead and get through the...
Oh, I guess we should also maybe say I'm taking notes and Brian is moderating.
Yes. Oh, yes, I am moderating. I guess that would be a good thing for everyone to know. All right, so the first thing that we have on our agenda, I'm just going to go through the bullet points one by one, starting at the top. Does that sound okay to everyone? So starting with our first item is the scope and mission of the working group. Our second item is the submission process for joining the working group. Our third point is balancing privacy and transparency in our communication systems. Our fourth is moderation policies and enforcement. And our fifth is schedule and assignment of deliverables. And then we have 3 deliverables that we would like to get through today. This is our membership policy, version 1, our charter, version 1, and our code of conduct, version 1. So first, let's kind of talk about the scope of the working group. I think that we all have a pretty good idea of this, but it'd be good just to kind of have everyone talk about that a little more, make sure that we're all on the same page. And so I open it up to all of you.
So I guess I'll start. I think that there's kind of 2 things that we should talk about here. One is how we see it starting, and then 2, kind of ideally, like in the long run, what we'd like to see the inclusivity working group do. Because I think that this is going to be an iterative process. The first thing I'd like to see is that the inclusivity working group have its own autonomy. So its scope includes itself, which currently I think is actually up for debate, which means that I'd like to see the working group be able to do moderation on itself and also have its own code of conduct. Ideally, in the long run, these things should be upstreamed to the Node project completely. So that meaning that we at least can serve as a resource for moderation, being that we can talk about how we think things should be moderated and based on what policies. And that additionally, we also be able to have influence over what the code of conduct is on the Node project.
I agree with a lot of that. I think ideally this group is providing guidance to the larger Node organization on things that are related to inclusivity. But we should be able to have some ability to also handle our things that are just under the purview of our group.
Any other thoughts on that? I realize we don't have anyone from the TSC here. It looks like Jeremiah wasn't able to join. So what I can say from my knowledge is that, yeah, all working groups do have their own autonomy. That's part of the foundational charter from the TSC.
That's good to know. I wonder if, because of the population we have in this meeting, in the population we have otherwise in the participation of the working group. To unfortunately have to play a thing that I don't really like playing very often, which is devil's advocate and or be representing what we know are the people's opinions that are not present.
I can try and do that.
Yeah. So I'll start with the idea that the proposal of the code of conduct. I'm aware that people think that this proposal of the code of conduct for the working group is not in scope of the working group, and that the working group should be under the code of conduct of the Node project itself. So I think this is a scope argument. And then my rebuttal to that would be that I believe because working groups have their own autonomy, that we should have the ability to implement our own code of conduct that is different than the Node projects.
I think it makes sense based on like the types of things that this group will be working on, that having a stricter code of conduct makes a lot of sense, because this group will be specific, like the scope of this group is specifically dealing with issues that are going to be more sensitive, that are going to be a little trickier, and so, whereas writing code hopefully doesn't hit on those issues as often, and so it's easier. Yeah, the main Node code of conduct also doesn't have any kind of notes about who to contact when something goes wrong and things like that, and so for our individual working group, having some additional information about this is how it will be handled, this is who we can contact, I think is really valuable.
Yeah, honestly, when I proposed the code of conduct using NPMs, frankly, the actual points of policy between nodes and NPM's codes of conduct were nearly identical as far as I could tell. The only thing that the NPM one added was like explicit details about enforcement, about if you feel like you've been wrongly accused. It really just fleshed out the operations of the code of conduct, and this is why I think eventually I'd like to see it upstream to nodes, because I think in essence it is the same, but it adds those operational elements that make it actually enforceable, which is, again, another thing we'll be talking about today, but when we talk about scope, that ability to enforce, I think, is really critical.
I agree. I think the enforcement thing is kind of scary right now because the parties in particular, I assume, are possibly unclear on what the actual scope of what that kind of stuff would be like. I think they're afraid that, to put it bluntly, I think there's actual fears in more than one place in the community and in the TSC about having something that looks like a witch hunt happen, and I don't think that's anyone's intention. I think that, as we discuss this and we get more concrete things, my hope is that those fears will simply go away. As they see that it's not a threatening thing, as they see that the way that this manifests in 99% of the time is just asking someone to use a very slightly different word, because that small change makes a big difference to someone, right?
And has very little implications otherwise.
Exactly. A lot of terminology which already exists in other places. So, if that small change gets us a bigger contribution from an entire demographic, then I think that's, about as on board with wanting to have an open community that welcomes anyone according to how they can code, as long as they, don't prevent others from doing that effort as well, I think that's a key part of that,
Yeah, I think that the fears that you mentioned is definitely one of the things that's coming up with people on the list, and it's important to think about considerations of code of conduct and moderation related to our group. Potentially, we don't have the power to moderate all of Node. It's not like if we create this group, we will suddenly be saying, you're out, ha 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 ha.
No.
Like we don't have the power to do that. I think at most we would be making recommendations for maybe an incident response process, but that would be us making recommendations about the process, maybe having some of the people from our group participating in handling incidents, but we would not have that power. We would not be a shadowy cabal, which is, I think, what some people are imagining, is that the inclusivity group would suddenly be the group that's in charge of yelling at people, and that's definitely not our goal as far as
I don't really want to do that.
To circle back to kind of summarize, because I actually think we're moving on to maybe a different point. Should the way we want to say about the scope of the working group, I'm thinking about the charter here, is that the working group would like to have autonomy, and it would like to be able to moderate itself, and then would like to also be able to provide recommendations for moderation outside of it in the greater Node project. Does that seem like language that is a little bit better, I think, than actually what we have right now?
I think that would be better. I think it's also really important to point out how much, honestly, we had a bit of an actual harassment campaign targeting the working group for the past, week? Longer?
Yeah.
And it's been like an actual concerted effort, and we can't just keep making like requests to the TSC to justify the person when they don't have the perspective. It's like, yeah, okay, fine. All they posted was like a little aubergine, but everyone in context knows there's more to it than that. And it's, if someone is constantly derailing our conversations, then that prevents us from doing our jobs, and we need to be able to keep things in line.
I think that derailment line is particularly very important. When people start their statements with, I don't use Node, but I've been watching, that's called derailment, and you're not participating anymore.
Right.
And we need to have the ability to do that for ourselves, and I think that the heat that we're feeling, like this temperature going on, is often also the TSC people responding to the external harassment the way we are. It's frustrating and it gets you on edge and you can't keep up. So I think eliminating a lot of that is going to improve the climate generally on the repository.
All right, so I'm going to go and do a time check. We need to kind of get on to our next session. This is really good. I think if I might add to your summary earlier, Ashley, that I think another point is that we don't really want to be involved in enforcement across the project, and that we could definitely say that that's out of scope for this working group. Would you agree?
I think the only thing I want to say is I'm not sure if I see recommending like moderation things not being enforcement in some way. Do you know what I mean? I don't see those as separate, but maybe they are. Maybe we just need to define them. Like enforcement and moderation are terms that we're using together, and sometimes I think there's overlap. So when we get to that section, maybe we talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
But, like, I don't think we want to be like the quote-unquote like moderation police, like the enforcers.
Mm-hmm.
If that's maybe what you mean.
Yeah, I kind of like to think of it as almost like sort of a separation of powers, like in the government, sort of like an executive branch and a legislative branch, almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like that this group maybe it sounds kind of like we're saying we want this group to be more like a legislative branch, but not executive.
Ooh, hold on, you're roboting really hard. You're doing the robot a bit there.
It was actually the Fourth Eyes microphone coming on.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Okay.
Sorry guys, it was me.
Oh my god, lower your
Welcome
volume.
to the world of audio.
I figured out how to fix it.
Sorry, Julie, you were saying?
I was saying I think the moderation body is a separate working group from us. That potentially there could be membership across both. There could be people who are in both working groups, but they're separate things. But that this group could make recommendations on incident response handling processes, but that would be recommendations. We wouldn't set them, and that's something that a different working group should be doing. Does that seem accurate?
I think so. Just talking about the metaphor for a second, we have executive, we have legislative, and then there's judicial, right? And I think the one that everyone's worried about is the judicial one. And the trick is that both parties are going to end up doing a little bit of that. And I think what needs to be understood is that this judicial portion is not fascist or witch hunt in any way, but that we're both trying to take like measured understandings of the policies we have in place and then respond accordingly. And if Node inclusivity is going to actually be doing anything, I think we definitely need to have some sort of hand in that.
Yeah, it seems like we have the power to moderate our specific working group and participation in there, and then wider Node community things, we make recommendations, but we are not in charge of moderating that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, again, I don't want the Node inclusivity working group to be a silo. If we moderate ourselves and we create legislation for ourselves, none of which is upstreamed, what are we doing? So there is a level of buy-in that's going to have to happen, and I think another thing with the charter and getting it ratified is we need buy-in from the TSC, like actual, powerful buy-in. And a lot of this derailment, I think, is pushing off the need for that basically sort of confrontation to happen. Is like, you have to say that you're into this now.
Yeah.
So that, with that, I don't know if we want to move on to the next, because we've already started touching on all the other things. So.
We are. And I think that's okay, because these are all very much interrelated.
Yeah.
I am going to make a recommendation. The second bullet point, the submission process for joining the working group. I'm going to recommend that we actually don't discuss that item just for time's sake.
Okay.
I've done a little work on it, but I don't want to participate anyways, and I don't think there's been a lot of other movement on that yet. So I just recommend we table that for now. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, I also think that might be good for async because it seems to be the least hot button, like of all the other things.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, and this is balancing privacy and transparency. My opinion on it, so I'll just kind of try to set the stage a little bit, is that these two are somewhat at odds. I will say that we want to try and protect people within the group, and we also want to have places where we can discuss without say bike shedding and other issues, just to be, because we can be a lot more productive that way. But of course, that's done in private, and so no one else sees what's going on, and that's. I think we're all in agreement here that transparency is a good thing. Transparency is something we want to strive for. It has a lot of benefits to the project, to the group, to the work we do. So it's just, how do we find that right balance?
So I just posted a list to my comment that I made on the original post a week ago. Can you believe it's been a week? Oh my gosh. And then I'll leave it at that. Like, I think that just the general gist should be that the things that we do are public. However, reporting incidents, discussing incidents and incident like response, those things should happen in private channels and then should be like anonymized and published publicly as process.
I do think that it's important to have something that is limited to members for member level discussion. Not that we're going to hide what we're going to change, but more that I think it's important to have a space where we can bring up ideas, even when we know they might not be like that welcome elsewhere. And so we can talk about them and think about ways of proposing it. Of course, any output that we have, any actual effect that we would have on the community would definitely be public and rationalized publicly. But I think that we need a place, especially for stuff like this, where it's just going to get monitored by all these people, and they want to jump in and really, and there's a certain stage where these conversations are very, very prone to disruption. And I think it's important to have those conversations not on GitHub issues, but in private, so we can have concrete proposals, and along with those concrete proposals, a clear, straightforward way of answering specific questions. So it's not just like, hey, look at this enormous thing, tell me what you think. It's like, hey, look at this thing, these are the points that we all agree on and we feel very strongly about keeping. This is the rationale behind those points, and these are the ones that we want feedback on. And we want feedback along these lines. I think we actually need to structure any such discussions when they go public, because otherwise we've been generating a lot of noise with this. That's my reading of any of the GitHub threads right now. There's just so much noise, and it's hard to make out what we're actually talking about.
So spot on. I mean, I wonder if maybe even couching it in the idea of like the way you create a working space for a group. Like, a lot of people agree that bullpen offices are terrible because it's horrible and difficult to focus on, and you have all these different conversations going on. And that, like, we really need environments where we're able to create like a usable public interface for direct and like constructive feedback. And we have to be able to define what constructive is, and at the beginning of something you don't always know.
I agree with all of that. And I think that allows us to have transparency. We're not going to go make decisions and then say from on high, these are the decisions, everybody has to agree with them. It's that we want to bake our decisions a little bit before we provide them for general feedback from the outside world. so that we don't get derailed before we can even get to a fully baked decision about things.
Also, for what it's worth, it seems like it's very easy for people to throw issues up on GitHub, but this meeting seems to have attracted the people who are interested in wanting to work on something constructive. So while it is frustrating and time zones make this hard and we'll have to move them around, potentially having more video call meetings might be even useful. And then the fact that they are recorded means that they are public, but we are eliminating such an amount of noise.
Absolutely.
The one thing that I want to keep in mind, Ashley, around only doing video meetings or some of this is that potentially that has accessibility concerns for some people. So
That's really right.
it can also potentially be hard for, I think, non-native English speakers.
And our stuff, like, I don't want to wake up at 8 a.m. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think doing some...
Well, I meant by cycling them, we could all have to wake up at 8 a.m. at some point.
I think we could also potentially do some of them in the Slack channel via text to be more accessible. I think for people who, for non-native English speakers, sometimes it's easier to have the time to read. If we have anybody who is deaf, they wouldn't really be able to participate in this. So we should keep in mind that it doesn't have to be video, but I don't want to derail too much with that.
Yeah. I just want to add, the fourth I wrote just that the TSC meetings are invitation-based, but people can see the entire discussion on YouTube.
Well, it does have a private section, so I think that having a mechanism like that is useful for us too.
I think the more things we can borrow from the TSC to show that we think that what they're doing is good, the better.
Absolutely. I think
they'll like that.
I think I would like that. I mean, we have an organization, right? And there's no reason that we need to reinvent the wheel every single time.
Completely agree.
The fourth, I'd really like to get your opinion on this too, since you're actually not in the Slack channel. What is kind of like your view and thoughts and impressions so far on how the group has been operating as somewhat more of an outsider so far? Oh, and Jonah too. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah, so both of you, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. I'll type real quick. My apologies. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, even I feel that it's better to have a private channel to discuss this stuff. Considering the recent trolls, it's better to have a private channel to discuss all this stuff. But it should be available in public so that people can read what we have discussed, or it should be available in public as well. I mean, during the discussion, nobody should interrupt us. Maybe after that, we can publish whatever we have discussed, something like that. TSC operates that way, and yeah, most of the meetings in Node.js work groups are happening that way. So it would be better, I guess. But yeah, absolutely. I also prefer the private channel to discuss our stuff.
Cool.
Would anyone? Okay, let me ask this question. I think we're all in agreement on sort of the need for public and private. I think there's a lot of pressure, and I think reasonably so, to define what can be done in private and or actually what needs to be done in public, and to have that like documented and actually sort of like regulated. What is everyone's thoughts on that?
I think Julie made a point like pretty well where she said all decisions that we come out with will be both made public and publicly rationalized, which I read to mean that it's like we're not coming down on high with we have decided X and now this is the real world. More like after some deliberation, we've decided that we think X, Y, and Z are a good idea. These are the reasons we came up with for that. And then I think opening that to a discussion for, maybe a couple of days, like after we've kind of figured out what we want and what that public interface, that public criticism that we want, open that up for like 2 days to get responses and then like finalize the decision.
Mm-hmm.
I think we may have to expand that to maybe be a week. That seems like
I guess so.
Just so that if somebody's like out for a day, they don't miss stuff. But in general, I agree with that. One of the things that I think is actually really valuable to do in private, which I think I've seen mixed comments about, but in general, is actually incident response and moderation. And I think it's one of those things where we don't want to shadowy cabal, but actually doing incident response in public is actually very painful for everybody. And that's actually one of the things that the folks that we've been kind of at heads with are actually, I think that that's actually kind of one of the things that's the problems with past incidents that they've been upset about, is that the entire internet falls down and starts yelling at people on a GitHub issue. And if an incident was handled in a more private way, it would probably be better for the person who is potentially being censured or asked to adjust their behavior or whatever, and would also avoid all that pylon stuff that's happening.
There's a lot more opportunity for education there too.
Exactly. That incident response should ideally be adjusting things, making the community well. It's not intended generally to be putting somebody in the stockade in the center of the internet square to be yelled at. And so doing that in private actually gives that both the person being censured and the community a better way to handle it. But at the same time, then it's not public and is transparent. And so there's some interesting tension, I think, specifically in incident response, both for our immediate group and then potentially for making recommendations for how Node handles incident response. There's some really interesting things there.
Something that Kat, did you have something to
add? I think there's more to it than just that. I agree entirely. I think that we can generate a formal proposal about what aspects of that need to be public. I definitely don't think that we should just have moderation happen entirely in the background. Like, I think we need to write up reports, for example, about moderation action that was taken, why, what was done. For certain, in the very much more rare extreme cases, we may actually have to name names. We may actually have to say, this person did this actually really awful thing, and they're no longer welcome anywhere in our community, so please watch out for them. But that's the rare case. In most cases, we might say something like, we had a brief incident with racist language, and one of our issues, the person was contacted offline. They corrected the comment and apologized, and the situation was settled. But we need to, I think we do need to take note of every time we do something, have a report that the community can read, so that they know there's actually stuff going on, so that they know that we don't actually need to point to issues even. We can say a minor issue was resolved in one of the working groups. That might be enough as a line item. And we can have more detailed notes of our own, but I think we can discuss publicity levels based on the nature of the thing, and that we can, for example, we could propose to the CSC that they can determine the final publicity of incident reports, right?
They might like that. That's
they might like that a lot.
Off there.
In the end, we will always do public line item reports that are non-specific and non-targeting and non-named, but we might make recommendations saying, this one we should really publish. this is not a reputation we're going to try and preserve here. But that should be rare if it ever happens. I hope it never happens.
And in the case of ones that happen outside of our working group, that's absolutely not under our purview beyond us making recommendations about process.
Yeah, that's more about the moderation working group, which exactly. I don't know if we're talking about today, are we?
We are. I think that's the next point.
Okay. Yeah, so we can talk about that further in the moderation thing, because I think this comes back to that.
I was going to read back the notes that I had so far, because I actually think that we are repeating ourselves now.
Okay.
If you want me to read the notes.
I'm okay with this.
Does that seem okay?
Yeah, we're definitely touching on some similar themes again. I would like to ask a question to the group as well. So regarding, like creating reports and all these kind of things for actions taken, yeah, I think we're definitely on board. I would like to ask what your thoughts are when it comes to flat-out trolls. Like, as we saw, we had a lot of influx from 4chan and 8chan last week. And I do think there's a concern with, if we have to go through a lot of process for each of these, that, those kind of trolls could end up bogging down the system. So what are your thoughts on that as well?
I think we need an incident response process to work on, and I think that process could potentially have, this is the normal process for people acting in good faith on the situation, and there should potentially be an exception for people who are clearly trolling and are not even trying to participate, and having maybe a fast track process for them. And then maybe our transparency is today we banned 5 trolls, and we don't have to do more detail than that or something.
Yeah, we don't actually have the ability to ban people from the org, I don't think, or from our repo.
Yeah.
Even I have like maintainer on the repo, and I don't have that ability. So that's again when I think going back up to scope where like we need moderation, like our own autonomy. I think declaring something in the code of conduct, like having our own code of conduct that includes these enforcement policies, can have that delineation about acting in good faith and bad faith. But I also don't even think we need to question people's faiths. Like, if it's derailing and we say, like, that's not, like, against the code of conduct, we can just close for being derailing.
Derailing specifically will be a tricky one, because there will be a weird case where, like, playing devil's advocate for a second for some of the folks that are worried, they're going to be like, anytime anybody disagrees with them, they're going to call us derailing and ban us from the channel. So that will be an interesting gray area versus people who are like posting eggplants and they're clearly not, like, that's what I mean by not participating in good faith. They're not trying to participate, they're just trying to be annoying. And so there will be some gray area there where I think we will have to be careful about the specific derailing thing, because that's a tricky, like, gray area.
Kat, do you have something?
I think that it's worth noting the evolution of trolls, that they'll try and seem less and less egregious over time. I think there's something to be said about, I agree entirely with, like, short-term, quick deletions of comments. We can say we deleted this comment, here's the screenshot, we banned this person for now, and we'll review it at the end of the week. But this person, it was a new account, it was not an active participant in the Node community, the attitude was hostile and derailing to the conversation at hand, and we might consider, like, unbanning them pretty soon after, but right now we just don't want to go through a process of an actual more formal ban,
Like an emergency ban.
Yeah, just, I think of it more as a quick mute, like the closest thing to a quick mute we can have in a conversation. It's like, I'm sorry, like, what you said is not actually relevant right now. I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you're saying the things you're saying, and you're clearly not cooperating. So it's not that we want you to shut up forever, but right now we can't tell the difference between you and a genuine troll. And I think, I think people who are established members of the community won't experience this. Anyone who's from, who's a known contributor, we can find out very quickly who's a known contributor and then not have that fast track process apply to them. That way, if you have actual, like, aggressive voices popping up, they better damn well have, like, some footing.
Yeah, that can be tricky when there's, like, a question of if you're, like, a contributor or not. Like, I don't know. I don't have like contributions on Node necessarily, but there's a question of like who counts as someone as part of the Node community and who counts as a rando. I have already been accused of being a rando in this community, so I think that brings up the question as to what is a rando. And I think that, generally, Kat, that's like a totally good policy, but I can see people who are afraid of it poking this hole in it immediately and being like, well, I don't know why Ashley's doing anything. She's a rando.
Well, I think in your case, you definitely have people who are willing to say, no, Ash is legit. She's here, and she's here on our invitation.
There's
and
also
she might be new, but she's more than welcome,
there's also a point to be made that just because you're an active contributor to the Node community doesn't mean that you don't have to participate in good faith in the inclusivity working group.
Yeah. I'm just saying don't fast track the process for them. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just for the fast track policy.
Yeah.
This is an interesting point, and I don't know if this is we're moving more towards a different topic, so I'll just briefly describe it. We can talk about it later. I made a point this morning on Twitter, and it's been what's frustrating me the most about this entire thing, is that the external harassment is like shitty and a pain in the ass, but the harder part is the harassment that's coming from within the TSC. And we don't really have a way to deal with that appropriately, I don't think. And a lot of people who are in power are allowed to pretty much do whatever they want. And I think it's extremely hostile and not helpful to our cause. And I would like a way, and maybe this is talking more with the moderation group, but there needs to be a way to handle that behavior. And the biggest climate changes we've seen have been a result of those things. And it's literally just like a flat, people saying what you said was unacceptable, that was a personal attack, oh, what you're doing is accusing me of this, and the infighting there, I think, is extremely dangerous and something that we need to look at.
Well, I think I could say that actually goes back to the scope and mission of this working group entirely. I mean, the reason we exist is to try and make the Node community better. That's kind of what we're working towards ultimately.
Right, but unfortunately, in the process, as we I think decided in that, in the short term, we can only hope for our own autonomy. But again, if we're not to be a silo, we need to be able to upstream things. And frankly, we need to be able to upstream things in a way that doesn't incur harassment. And you know what? I haven't seen that happen yet.
Yeah. Well, I think
it's still early days.
What?
I said it's still early days. I think.
Sure, yeah, but I see it as a problem that's not going away anytime soon.
Oh, absolutely. I'm hoping that this is the kind of thing where, will this be better when we're given our own autonomy, when we're hopefully legitimately chartered with the TSC? And I'm actually curious what that process looks like. I don't know what it does. And also, it will be easier to upstream things if we show that they've been working well for our group. Like, hey, this has been well for X weeks. This is how it's been going. Let's consider it. Versus just sending it upstream immediately without any showing it working. So, I think it will get better over time if some of those things happen. So I think some of the questions I think one of the big questions is how do we create a relationship with the TSC so that those things can happen, so that we have a way to address these things that are going on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I guess the only thing is, while that's happening, is it just we agree to get shat on?
I mean, shat on, no. But I think there is some politics.
Not to dance around it, but I'm talking about CurseGate.
Yeah, and that happened in a different repo, which means it's not necessarily under the purview of this.
It was the TSC, though. It was inclusivity talking, or was it moderation?
Yeah.
It was moderation, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's some open questions there about who can potentially be willing to do, to run interference and stuff like that. Isaac was doing a good job of that to some degree when he was around.
Yeah, I
don't know
if great job. I don't know if you read that last little piece trip, but
there was more. What did I miss?
Well, no, Rod basically wrote an apology to me and then tore up Isaac for defending me.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Isaac's a big boy, but that's not fair.
As a note of point that happened in a private repo, and this is a public on air, and I don't know if it's fair to be calling people out in public.
That's fair. Okay.
That's fair.
You might have to edit that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it would be beneficial for us maybe to think about talking about this off air, as I think it's a larger. It's not a point that can be resolved by the people in this room necessarily, because we don't have as much insight into the TSC as far as I know from the people in the room.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with that. Good call.
All right, so I think we've actually talked a lot about moderation policies and enforcement and as part of this. So I'm going to recommend at this point we move on to the last point, the schedule and assignment of deliverables. Is everyone okay with that?
I think that seems good.
All right, so we have 3 deliverables that we're interested in. There's the membership policy, which we've decided to table at least for this meeting. So we decided to table the bullet points, so I'm also going to recommend we don't discuss the membership policy right now. Is everyone okay? So instead we just have the charter and the code of conduct.
Oh, actually, you know what? We did table the discussion, but I think that we should assign and schedule a draft.
Okay. All right, yeah, I think that makes sense.
Because I think we still need to move forward on that, because as we move forward and trying to actually make things real, the question of who is making those things and who's making them real will come up very quickly. And so being able to say how people got involved is important.
Certainly. So I'll jump in a little bit in the conversation here for the membership policy. So as some of you might have seen, I put a straw proposal in the Slack chat. I've been doing a little work on that, so I'm willing to take that on and spearhead that.
Okay.
That I'm kind of a good fit for that role, and if not, I'm perfectly happy to let someone else take it on too.
I think that seems good. Do you want like would someone want to volunteer to be the reviewer for it? So that I feel like I never want one person to be working alone.
Right.
So like you have a buddy system of some sort.
I feel like posting it into the Slack channel and having people help might be enough, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably good, but I don't know, as a point of policy, just having like I work alone on like a project where I'm a team of 1, and like yes, we have a Slack channel of a bunch of people, but that means that there has to be a good faith someone present to do it. Whereas like if we just say X person will help you, it just takes away the questions.
Yeah. I responded a little bit to the straw proposal you made, so I'd be happy to help you with that. As long as you're cool with like doing it via text versus having to do it via chat or something.
Yeah, I'm fine with text. I kind of prefer that as well. So.
Great. And then is there like I know that we are all so busy and this is like an intense thing, but is there like a date, maybe like end of week, have a draft like ready like that we want to propose? Or is that too short?
I'll say by Friday have a pull request open.
That sounds, I think that sounds good.
All right.
And then so Friday there will be a PR, and then when do we want to close responses to that PR?
I think we should probably for now make the process be a week, since that seemed to be maybe the policy that the TSC uses for stuff.
That sounds great to me. So Friday is the, I can't do math, 21st?
20th.
Friday's the 20th.
Okay, so Friday 20th is the PR, and then we'll close it on the 27th. Cool. I'm cool with that.
All right. That works for me. So the charter.
Charter.
So there's
Sorry.
Way to go, dude.
So there's some open-ended questions and discussion about the charter, is there not? Because there's 2 of them now.
I would really like to, as a result of this conversation, won't fix the new proposal and ask that it be added to the charter. I think that it's anti-collaborative. I don't see significant differences. It's basically the charter that we started on. Then I closed and reopened a new one with the additions from the previous comments. So I see it almost as a complete step backwards. I don't think there's any reason why the comments and criticisms he proposes in the second charter couldn't be added to the first one.
I kind of wonder if it's an issue of scope, because we did just have a discussion about the scope of action that we can take within and without the group. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I got a big sense from James's proposal that he was under the impression that we would have a lot more power than we've actually been discussing.
Yeah, I think there's probably some changes we could make to our current one to clarify, and maybe
Absolutely.
that would be sufficient to meet his need. So I think for the sake of being politically polite, it might be beneficial to try to make some changes and then say, we've put changes over on this pull request, so we're filing this as don't fix because we've added it over there, versus just saying won't fix and not doing anything.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wasn't saying don't fix and not add a comment.
Yeah.
But this is something that he actually alluded to in another thread
I
that
saw.
caused significant problems in talking with people about things. Like when I was like, we as a group have already decided that problematic language is a thing that we need to deal with. This is about not whether we should deal with it, but how to. And they were like, well, Snell said that there's a whole nother charter and that you guys don't even have a thing, so we can do whatever the fuck we want. And this is like a line of argument that like needs to not exist. We need to have foundational values that we can just say, this is just not up for debate, I'm sorry. And this goes back to the idea of having like a constructive public interface for like how much feedback we want. This is also why, and yes, I obviously seem to like to move quickly, but I want something published.
I think
because, again, I think Forrest said something like trying to nail a block of Jell-O to a pole is kind of how this feels. And so we can't keep doing that or we're all going to go mad. So, yeah, I don't know what the feedback is for that, but I would like to take maybe Snell's comments, the comments that currently exist regarding the use of the word node community. I think some of those can be, oh, I guess that's in the code of conduct one. Anyways, I would like to get a charter shipped by like, I would really like something up today.
So just kind of a procedural point. I agree with everything you said. I think you are spot on, and I think we should get something up today too. Maybe a procedural point that we might want to kind of maybe expressly put in the document at the top that this is a living document. This has not been ratified yet, and maybe explicitly say this has not been ratified yet.
I think it already says that.
But make sure it's
in bold or something.
That's in bold at the top. It's not just people.
Oh, it's at the top. It's from the original one that Trot wrote.
Okay. This is a question for the group I've been contemplating. Would it be politically expedient for now to just take out the references to the node community and then work them in later?
That would make sense, I think, for the case of the scope of let's focus on our immediate group first, make sure things are working there properly, and then work on making recommendations to the larger node community.
Looks like the fourth eye had something.
Oops, sorry.
No, it's cool. He raised his hand. I do this too.
I mean, oh yeah. I kind of find it difficult to follow what you're saying. You talk too fast.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Maybe
no, thanks for letting us know. That's very helpful.
As a question for you, is text easier for you to follow than people speaking on a video chat like this?
Sorry.
Oh,
I'm typing it right now.
That answers the question.
that will answer my question.
Yeah, it does seem. I just wrote it in there. So.
Vidioc hat. I want a Vidioc hat. What's a Vidioc? Isn't it awful to not have like editing abilities?
Yeah, I once said they should implement SED in video chat. That would be great.
And very quick, just off-topic thought. We can consider in the future, just a procedural point, maybe not doing video chat, doing some other sort of real-time collaboration that might be easier for other people to follow.
It also
occurs
to me, I'm taking notes in a gist. There's no reason I couldn't take notes in a living document. And when we have an actual scribe who could like probably get most of the stuff down, you could follow via notes.
That's a good point.
Yeah, Etherpad.
I don't know what
Sorry,
that
I
is.
used to work at Mozilla. Etherpad is like the bane of my existence.
Maybe Google Doc or something. Whatever it is. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, whatever. I'm making a joke there. I would use Etherpad.
Etherpad is Etherpad. Yeah.
All right. So the charter and code of conduct, as far as like deliverables and landing, is everyone on board with landing those today? By the end of the day, does that work for you, Ashley, especially?
So here's how I think. I think if we land both today, people are going to be like capital M mad. Even if we're like it's a living document and it doesn't really count. So I think I'd like to land the charter today and the code of conduct Friday.
Okay.
The charter points to the code of conduct, yes?
What was this?
The charter does include a link to the code of conduct, doesn't it?
Yes, but we can link it to the issue.
Okay, that seems reasonable.
And then we'll update it when we ship the original code of conduct. The reason I say the code of conduct Friday also is like there's just some like actual cleanup on that needs to happen. That's not even like policy work. It's just like drudgery. Like I left some like cutting and pasting, like made some weird line breaks and that kind of stuff. The stuff that needs to be cleaned. I actually am really encouraged by the conversation on the code of conduct page. Frankly, we have some of the bigger, more hotter head types actually making, I think, constructive, reasonable comments. So I'm not super eager to necessarily, like, I think there's a little bit more we can get out of that conversation in such a way that maybe those people also feel like they have skin in the game and that this is something they collaborated on, which can only be a positive thing.
Would you like someone else that's kind of assigned you to help you with that? Kind of like we're also.
Yes, the buddy system. I love the buddy system. Yeah, I don't know who is the most interested in that. I don't know. I'm happy to take point because those things are already pretty fleshed out. But it's really going to be more like making sure we don't skip comments and making sure that everyone gets responded to and that kind of thing.
So possibly a recommendation. Julie, do you have the time for this?
For stuff to get done today, I don't. I really need to focus on getting like my job work done today.
Yeah.
So I probably won't be able to do stuff if you want to get it done by the end of the day.
Oh, that's right. I have a job too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking for the code of conduct, which is by Friday.
Yeah, by Friday that gives me leeway to like help with stuff, and it also seems like there's less work to do on that one. That one seems like it's actually in a pretty good state.
The code of conduct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really just like some cleanup stuff, and then there's like a couple of like wording things regarding like the Node.js community, which I think we've already kind of talked about even removing. So
yeah.
I think it's primarily like cleanup work.
Yeah, I can help with the code of conduct, and already agreed to help with the membership thing, but I don't have time for the working charter.
That's fine. So maybe we are 1 minute over time. I know we all have jobs. I wonder if with the charter, it's been up for a while. Can we just clarify what the biggest problems are with it? Like, I think we've already just, like, a lot of the points that we've discussed here, I'm just going to completely upstream into the charter, including stuff about scope, stuff about the recommendations, stuff about private but always publicly, like, published, like, as a report in a line item. Those, to me, seem to address the vast majority of the current concerns we've received on the charter. Is there anything else I'm missing? Because if not, I'm just going to assume you guys are all the buddies, and this was our work on it today, and then we're just going to ship it.
I kind of agree with shipping it. I think if you make those changes, that would hopefully address the concerns that I've seen voiced from people who are actually in the community.
How about you add those changes, Ashley, and then post it, like, ping us in the Slack channel? I have the time to, like, if you update stuff, to read it and be like, oh, there's a typo here. Oh, I think this should be reworded.
You just read my brain.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, if you could all just read it and then R+ it, then at least it will not be Ashley decided to do this all on her own because
Yeah,
that's going to get me in big trouble.
Yeah, I can absolutely give like the 10-15 minutes to read it and provide feedback for a +1. I just don't have time to like do the work of rewriting stuff today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
I am
one thing I would
also
ask
fine with
is
reviewing.
if all of you would have the ability before I merge it at say like, end of day today to write a line saying like, I support this,
Yes.
so that we just see overwhelming support for it. That needs to be, I think, publicized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that there's consensus from the group that it's actually what we all want to happen. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And I think someone else should merge it as well, just as a procedural point.
I never merge my own shit, so cool.
I don't mind merging it myself. I guess I'm.
I can merge it as well if it might make sense to have someone not at the.
If you get Fish Rock to merge it.
Actually, yeah, we can ping him.
Yes.
That would be great.
The cabal continues.
We can fix that, Jonah.
Yeah.
100%. You showed up to the meeting. Done.
Mm.
Yeah.
You've been doing a lot of work. I think who's been a collaborator has been, again, this is kind of why that membership policy needs to be worked out, has been like, so please don't take it as offense. I think it's just that's kind of been lost in the shuffle, sadly. Not that that's an excuse.
I think it's worth noting some lingo stuff when it comes to the term collaborator, because a collaborator is something, it's an actual role in the Node Foundation. As I understand it, it's like actual something that you get onboarded for, that there's only like 40-something collaborators, and they need to actually go through an onboarding process. It's mainly for code contributors, etc.
That's interesting though, because I did not get that.
Anyway, here.
I'm one of the collaborators.
Let me get you the actual link.
Which chart is one?
I am supposed to be there as soon as I get onboarded,
you're
I
nominated.
think. Huh?
Your name is nominated there. You'll soon be a collaborator, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm gonna post this in here, I guess. So there's an actual collaborators team. And I think that's what people refer to when they mean Node collaborators, even though a lot of people are collaborating on the project.
Yeah, so I'll say after this meeting, we'll bring both of you on as full members. We'll get you access to the Slack and get you added as a contributor, I believe is the correct term that we want to use to the repository.
Yes, contributor I think is the
Yeah, there we go. That's
general
good.
one. Yeah.
All right, I believe we have covered all the topics we needed to cover. Is there any last items before we sign off?
One of my questions is, are we going to start having meetings like this more regularly? Are we going to do it ad hoc? Like that we'll just decide in the Slack channel when we want to do one?
That's a good question. I don't think we have an answer to that. All right.
I think doing them regularly makes it easier for people to know they happened. I'm going to guess that over the course of the day, we're going to discover that most people either didn't know this was happening or didn't know how to get to it.
So how else do the people who were here, how do you feel about how the meeting went? Is this a good structure, etc.?
I think this has been really productive. I would like to see, I guess, a more diverse set of voices so that we can direct concerns in this, face-to-face way, which I think is always the best way when you have feels going on, which we have lots of. So again, increasing the accessibility and visibility of the meeting, I think, is the most important. Structurally, I think it was good. I tend to like summaries of things before we move on to other topics. Procedurally, that would be the only thing I would change.
The one thing that we should keep in mind if we keep using Hangouts is I forget what the max. Does anybody know? There is a max number of participants, I believe, and so we'll have to keep that in as the group grows.
Yeah, it's 10 for a personal account and 15 for a Google Apps account.
Okay.
The one thing I will say is I also think this was a good number of people for talking. Maybe a couple more, but I love what the fourth I was saying about the TSC. It's like private invite, but everyone can like watch. So if we can figure out a way, I mean, I think that's already happening. Like you can watch, and then they have a certain number of participants. I think that would be great, and like maybe even posting an issue for every meeting that we call meeting, and then for people who are publicly watching that potentially want to ask questions like as follow-ups,
Hmm.
then we have a small forum for that.
I would also really like it to be standard practice to have an active facilitator in any, preferably someone who's actually like done the facilitator training too.
Yes.
I just posted a thread about having that as one of our core competencies in the working group, that we can provide that as a service to the community, not just ourselves, but I think part of that involves getting ourselves trained up too.
I was about to say, is there a training thing we should, maybe I'll just try and get that to happen.
Yeah, we can totally try and get that to happen. That would be something to talk to Jacob about right now, and then we can look into other training mechanisms as well. Yeah, there's only 4 of us right now, and I think having more people and knowing and having like an actual process for getting people into that would be
Might be something
fabulous.
as the membership policy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. We could also consider just an idea for size, kind of going back to size a little bit. Maybe some sort of like a rotating participants kind of thing. We try and get different people each time, rotating through the members or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a great idea once we hit a pace.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I don't think that's going to be good for like another 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm pulling that number out of my butt. But just given the pace of things and the fact that we're about to hit holiday season, which is going to just derail a lot of things.
I'm going to be around for like 2 more weeks before completely disappearing into the void.
A lot of people are going to disappear. I am very secular and don't really do holidays, so I'm not going to disappear, but I know that our abilities to do things are going to be slowed down tremendously.
Yeah.
All right, any final comments? All right, thanks everyone for joining in. I think this was great.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.